The day has come for you to know the truth. For many years, I avoided your questions, my child. About you, about me, about your father. But you must know, you're not from here. Your homeland is to the north, in Bulgaria. Let me tell you a tale. Once, a powerful noble named Constantine led a rebel army to Turnovo, the capital of Bulgaria. The reigning Tsar, a murderer who had usurped the throne, fled with his son Ivan to the court of the Roman Emperor. The grateful nobles of Bulgaria, a class of men called the Bulgars, proclaimed Constantine Tsar. The new king brought peace to Bulgaria. He wed the emperor's niece and even arranged the marriage of the Roman ruler's daughter to a one-eyed Mongol Khan. But such peace was not to last. Men are like wolves. They smell weakness. While riding, the Tsar fell from his horse, shattering his legs and spine. The crippled Tsar watched helplessly as his kingdom descended into anarchy. Tatar raiders invaded his lands, while the Bulgars busied themselves with increasing their own power. For fear of the raiders' torch, the peasants accepted the Bulgars' whip. A most unlikely man changed this fate. A common pig farmer appeared in a small village. His hands were calloused, and his weathered face was like that of any man who worked for his livelihood. But this man was different. Not only did he urge the people to resist the Tatars, but he somehow turned his words into action, leading a militia to defend the villages. Soon, his unlikely successes attracted the attention of far more powerful and ruthless men. Sometimes, the actions of others force us to make drastic decisions. Such was the case with Ivaylo. Whatever his intentions, the armed band he led grew beyond him. It became a force of fury and of revenge. Having overthrown their masters, the peasants took vengeance on the hated nobles, murdering their families before blinding them with scorching hot needles. Ivaylo himself was said to have slain Constantine. The Tsar's severed head was carried by a horseman to Turnovo, the capital. There, it was presented to the Tsar's wife, Maria, and their 7-year-old son. After her husband's murder, the Tsarina ruled the kingdom in disarray. Though this would have challenged even the most capable Tsar, the dark-haired Greek princess was greater than most men. Beautiful and cunning, Maria Paleologina Cantacuzene was a daughter of two of the greatest families in Constantinople. She had wed the Tsar on the orders of her uncle, the emperor, but her Byzantine guile proved as much a benefit to her husband. When a rival Bolyar threatened Constantine's rule, Maria offered to adopt him as her son and heir. The opportunistic Bolyar accepted and feasted in the Tsar's court, only to be found dead shortly afterward. Poisoned. But now, with an uprising in the countryside and scheming Bolyars in her own court, it would take all of Maria's cunning to preserve her power. But the more threatening menace came from her own uncle. The headstrong Roman Emperor Mikhail Palaiologos demanded his niece's submission. The Tsarina, just as strong-willed, refused. Furious that his own niece stifled his ambition, the emperor chose an exiled prince to place on the Bulgarian throne. Ivan, the returning son of the Asen dynasty deposed by Constantine, led a great Roman army to retake his father's kingdom. The Tsarina alone could not defeat the Romans, nor could Ivaylo challenge both the Tsarina and Ivan. The logic of these facts dictated the most unlikely alliance between a rebel leader and the wife of the Tsar he murdered. Ivaylo's army filled the Yantra River with Roman dead, securing Maria's place on the throne. Now, the Tsarina had to fulfill her end of the bargain. As Ivaylo approached the gates of the fortress, Maria waited silently for the man who had killed her husband. As Ivaylo stepped before her, the Tsarina placed the Tsar's crown, once worn by her husband and father of her child, on the swineherd's head, crowning a peasant a king. The objections of the watching nobility were silent but palpable. Then, in a hasty ceremony, Maria wed the newly crowned Tsar, tying her fate with his. Ivaylo watched suspiciously as the Bulgars bowed their heads in his presence. No matter what respect they showed him as Tsar in daylight, he knew they whispered and cursed him in the shadows. Murderer! Peasants, come! Turnovo might be the city of the Tsars, but it belonged to the Bulgars. Ivaylo knew that remaining there would be a death sentence, but he was tied to the city. The Tsarina was carrying his child, yet fatherhood would have to wait. The emperor was undeterred by Ivan Asen's defeat. He enlisted his son-in-law, a great Mongol warlord named Nogai, to unleash war on Bulgaria. A descendant of Genghis Khan, Nogai was broad-shouldered and barrel-chested. He had lost an eye battling a brother in the Caucasus, a disfigurement that cost him the chance to rule as Khan of the Golden Horde. However, that was to his liking. Nogai was not a man to sit idly in a golden tent. He became the kingmaker and the real power behind the horde, leading its warriors into battle. Mongols, Tatars, humans, warriors as numerous as blades of grass streamed across the Danube into Bulgaria. Ivaylo raced in the middle of the night to the river town of Drastar. There, he would raise an army and make his stand. In Turnovo, the Tsarina, alone and with child, waited for his return. A lone rider approached Drastar and called for the Tsar. Ivaylo wondered, was this a messenger of the one-eyed Khan offering peace? But as the Tsar raised himself against the battlements, he could see the horseman was a Bulgarian. What word did he bring from Turnovo? Did he come to tell Ivaylo of the birth of his child? No, the rider bore a message which chilled Ivaylo and the survivors of the siege. Tsar, the horseman began, your men in Turnovo are dead, murdered by the Bulgars who have opened the gates to Ivan Asen. Ivan has taken the Tsarina and your newborn child and delivered them as prisoners to the emperor. Ivaylo rode south, galloping past torched villages and overturned fields. He rode under the tall peaks and through the narrow passages of the Balkan mountains. There, the remnants of his army would make their final stand. A great Roman army was approaching, sent to reinforce Ivan's faction in Turnovo. The army was commanded by the general, Mikhail Glabas, who had strengthened his already impressive numbers with Tatar mercenaries. With Ivan in the north and the Romans marching from the south, Ivaylo knew neither refuge nor retreat remained for his last followers. His men would win or die in these mountain passes. But these valleys had witnessed impossible victories before. Here was where Bulgarian Khans and Tsars etched their places in history. The walls of granite rock echoed the names of heroes like Krum, Simeon, and Kaloyan the Roman slayer. To these, the names of Ivaylo and his men would be added. Ivaylo's impossible victory at the Kotel Pass brought fear to Ivan. He abandoned Turnovo and fled to the Emperor's court. The Emperor offered no solace to a coward. In Turnovo, no sooner had the Bulgars discovered the Tsar's throne empty than they began to squabble over it. The wisest of the Bulgars reminded the others that the kingdom was still threatened by both Mongols and Romans. Bulgaria needed stability, and that would mean all Bulgars would need to unite under a single banner. From among their ranks, the Bulgars found a warrior to defend and unite the kingdom. A man descended from the tribe of the legendary Cuman warrior, Kotyan. They chose Georgi Terter as Tsar. Betrayed by Georgi Terter, Ivaylo returned to Turnovo, but the gates were barred to him. His men finally gave up hope. They returned to their fields, their uprising in Ivaylo's brief reign just a memory, to be lost and forgotten. But Ivaylo could not forget. As he stood powerless before the city's walls, the weight of his fate as a mere pig herder finally weighed upon him. He had defied all odds. He had not just challenged a Tsar, a Khan, and an emperor, but had upset the very order of the world. He, a swineherd, had dared to overthrow kings and make men free. With these thoughts, Ivaylo took the greatest risk of his life. Perhaps blinded by his ambition, or blinded by his hope, Ivaylo turned to his enemy for help. He sought redemption in the land of the blind, where the one-eyed man is king. The one-eyed Khan ordered a feast for Ivaylo and Ivan Asen, where he listened to their arguments on why he should support one over the other. Then, having heard enough, Nogai rose and pointed to Ivaylo. In that moment, it is said that Nogai's guards seized Ivaylo and murdered him. The body was taken away as Nogai returned to his seat and finished his meal. But I am not so sure that was the end of our hero. In the years since, Ivaylo has appeared again in many places and many times. Wherever the downtrodden have the courage to fight for freedom and justice, Ivaylo seems to appear. He lives in all of us, and especially in you, my child. I can see you're confused. I know you're thinking, what does this pig-herding Tsar have to do with me? Don't you see, my dear? I lived in Bulgaria then. So did you, in fact. You were very young then. A mere baby when I wrapped you in your swaddling clothes and carried you here. It was on the day when the Emperor, my uncle, took us from Turnovo and from your father, Tsar Ivaylo.